Amelia stood at the edge of her window, gazing out over the rolling hills that surrounded her small village. The moon hung high in the sky, its silvery light spilling over the fields like a veil of magic, casting long shadows that stretched and shifted with the gentle sway of the wind. The night was quiet, but not in the way that makes you feel alone. It was the kind of quiet that wrapped itself around you, cradling you in its stillness, whispering that all was well with the world. For as long as she could remember, Amelia had been enchanted by the stories about the old garden at the far edge of the village, beyond the hill where the trees grew thick and wild. No one had been inside in years, not since the gate had been sealed shut with iron vines that twisted and curled over the wood like the fingers of a spell. The adults in the village always told the children to stay away, claiming the garden was dangerous, though no one ever seemed to explain exactly why. Some said it was haunted. Others claimed that wild animals prowled there, hiding in the thick shadows cast by the trees. But Amelia had never believed those stories. She'd always felt there was something more, something the grown-ups either didn't know or had forgotten. The garden called to her in a way that was hard to describe, like a faint melody that played just on the edge of hearing, drawing her closer whenever she thought of it. The idea of stepping beyond the gate, of discovering what lay hidden beneath the tangled vines and overgrown pathways, had occupied her thoughts for as long as she could remember. And tonight, with the moon so full and bright, the pull was stronger than ever. It was as if the garden itself was beckoning her, whispering her name in the rustle of the leaves, inviting her to come and see its secrets for herself. Amelia was not afraid. She had never been one to shy away from the unknown, especially when it came to the mysteries that lay hidden in the natural world. She had always felt a special connection to the earth, to the trees and the flowers, to the rivers and the stones. It was as if they spoke to her in a language that only she could hear, telling her their stories and sharing their secrets, and she had always listened. Without another thought, she slipped on her shoes, wrapped herself in her favorite blanket, and crept down the stairs of her little cottage. The house was quiet, her parents already fast asleep in their room down the hall. Amelia moved like a shadow through the house, her footsteps light on the wooden floorboards. She had become an expert at sneaking out at night, though she rarely did it for anything more than to sit beneath the stars or wander the edge of the woods near her home. Tonight was different. Tonight, she was going beyond the ordinary. She was going to the garden. The air outside was cool, but not cold, the kind of night where the warmth of the day still lingered in the earth, rising up in soft waves as she made her way toward the old stone wall. The path was familiar, winding through the village's edge and up the gentle slope of the hill that separated the village from the wild land beyond. As she walked, the stars above twinkled brightly, their light mixing with the glow of the moon to create a silvery blanket that covered the landscape. The grass brushed against her legs as she moved, its soft whispers adding to the symphony of the night. When she reached the top of the hill, the garden came into view. It was just as she remembered from the few times she had seen it during the day, an overgrown patch of land surrounded by a high stone wall, the gate locked tight with iron vines that twisted and curled in a way that seemed almost unnatural. But under the light of the moon, the garden looked different. It shimmered as though the very air around it was alive with magic. Amelia stood at the gate for a long moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out and ran her fingers over the iron vines that crisscrossed the wood. They were cool to the touch, smooth and unyielding. For years, the villagers had tried to break through the vines, to open the gate and see what lay beyond. But no one had ever succeeded. The vines were too strong, too deeply entwined with the gate itself. No one had ever figured out how to untangle them. But tonight, as Amelia stood there in the moonlight, something felt different. She couldn't explain it, but she had a feeling deep in her bones that the garden was ready to reveal itself. Slowly, she reached for the small pendant she wore around her neck, a simple silver charm that her grandmother had given her when she was a child. Her grandmother had always told her that the pendant was special, that it had been passed down through their family for generations, carrying with it the magic of the earth and the stars. Amelia had always cherished it, though she had never fully understood its significance. Now, as she held the pendant in her hand, she felt a soft warmth spread through her palm, as though the charm itself was coming alive. The vines on the gate seemed to shimmer in response, their iron tendrils vibrating softly under her touch. Without thinking, she pressed the pendant against the gate, and in an instant, the vines began to untwist themselves. Slowly, they unwound from the wood, slithering back like snakes retreating into the shadows until the gate was free. Amelia's heart raced as she pushed the gate open. It creaked softly, the sound almost welcoming in the quiet of the night. She stepped through the gate and into the garden, her breath catching in her throat as she took in the sight before her. The garden was unlike anything she had ever seen. The air was thick with the scent of flowers, sweet and heady, like jasmine and honeysuckle mixed with the crisp freshness of the night. Flowers bloomed everywhere, their petals glowing softly in the moonlight, casting a faint light that illuminated the entire space. The trees, tall and ancient, towered overhead, their leaves shimmering like silver coins in the breeze, and in the center of the garden stood a pond, its surface so still and clear that it reflected the stars above like a mirror. Amelia took a few hesitant steps forward, her eyes wide with wonder. This was the magic she had always believed in, the magic the grown-ups had forgotten or chosen not to see. The garden was alive with it, humming with a quiet energy that filled the air like music. As she moved deeper into the garden, she noticed small orbs of light floating lazily through the air. At first, she thought they were fireflies, but as she watched them more closely, she realized they weren't insects at all. They were tiny, glowing spheres of light, like miniature stars, drifting through the night with a life of their own. She reached out and cupped her hand beneath one of the orbs. It hovered for a moment, its soft glow illuminating her palm, before drifting away, disappearing into the shadows of the trees. Amelia smiled to herself, her heart full of a quiet joy she had never felt before. This place, this magical hidden garden, was everything she had ever dreamed of. It was a place where the world was still full of wonder, where anything was possible. She wandered through the garden for what felt like hours, though time seemed to move differently here. The trees whispered softly as she passed, their leaves rustling in a language she didn't quite understand. but found comforting all the same. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, their petals glowing like tiny lanterns, lighting her way as she explored every corner of the garden. Eventually, she found herself standing at the edge of the pond, its surface smooth and still, reflecting the night sky in perfect clarity. She knelt at the water's edge and dipped her fingers into the cool water, watching as tiny ripples spread out across the pond, distorting the reflection of the stars. The water was so clear that she could see the stones at the bottom, their surfaces smooth and polished from years of gentle currents. As she sat there, a soft rustling came from behind her. She turned, expecting to see another glowing orb drifting through the air, but instead, she saw a pair of eyes watching her from the shadows. For a moment, her heart leapt in her chest, but then the figure stepped forward, and she saw that it was a fox. Its fur was sleek and silver, almost blending in with the moonlight, and its eyes gleamed with a knowing intelligence. The fox tilted its head, watching her closely, as if it had been expecting her all along. Without a sound, it stepped closer and sat beside her, its gaze still fixed on the pond. Amelia smiled at the fox, feeling a strange sense of connection. It was as if the fox understood her, as if it had been waiting for her to find this place, to share in the magic of the garden. They sat together in silence, both watching the stars ripple in the water, the soft hum of the garden surrounding them like a lullaby. For the first time in her life, Amelia felt truly at peace. The worries and questions that had once filled her mind seemed to drift away on the breeze, replaced by a quiet contentment that settled deep in her bones. The garden was a place of magic, yes, but it was also a place of stillness, a place where the noise of the world fell away, and only the beauty of the moment remained. And as she sat there, with the silver fox by her side, she knew that this was just the beginning of her journey. The garden held many secrets, and she had only just begun to uncover them. Amelia sat quietly beside the silver fox for what felt like hours, though time seemed to lose all meaning in the garden. The stars continued their slow, steady dance across the sky, and the moonlight bathed everything in its soft glow. The fox, with its sleek fur shimmering faintly in the light, remained still, its eyes fixed on the pond, as if it too was entranced by the beauty of the place. Every now and then it would flick its ears or glance at her as though it was checking to make sure she was still there, still part of this magical moment. Finally, the fox stood and stretched, its movements graceful and fluid. It turned toward the trees, pausing briefly to look back at Amelia, as if inviting her to follow. Amelia didn't hesitate. She had always felt a pull toward animals, a connection she couldn't quite explain. But with this fox, the bond felt even stronger. It was as though they were meant to be together in this place, to explore the wonders of the garden side by side. The fox led her along a narrow path that wound through the trees, the soft moss underfoot making her steps nearly silent. The trees here were older, their trunks wider and more gnarled, their roots twisting up from the ground, like the fingers of ancient giants reaching toward the sky. The canopy overhead grew thicker, filtering the moonlight so that it came down in soft, dappled patches, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the forest floor. As they walked, Amelia noticed something strange. The further they went, the more the air seemed to hum with a quiet energy. It wasn't just the breeze rustling through the leaves, or the soft sounds of night creatures moving in the underbrush. It was something deeper, something alive. It was as though the very ground beneath her feet was vibrating with a hidden power, a pulse that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. The fox led her to a small clearing, hidden deep within the forest. At its center stood a tree, unlike any she had ever seen. It was massive, its trunk easily wide enough to encircle with her arms several times over, and its bark glowed with a faint, silvery light. The leaves, which shimmered in the moonlight, were a deep shade of violet, unlike any color she had ever seen in nature. They rustled gently in the breeze, their soft sound almost like a whisper, as though the tree was speaking to her in a language only the heart could understand. Amelia stood in awe, her breath catching in her throat. This tree, she realized, was the heart of the garden. She didn't know how she knew. It was simply a feeling that settled deep in her bones, as certain as the stars in the sky. This was the source of the magic that filled the garden, the power that kept it hidden from the outside world. Without thinking, she took a step closer, drawn to the tree like a moth to a flame. The fox watched her closely, but made no move to stop her. As she approached the tree, she noticed that its bark wasn't like the rough, cracked surface of the other trees in the forest. It was smooth, almost glassy, and as she reached out to touch it, her fingers tingled with warmth. The tree felt alive beneath her hand, pulsing with energy, as if it were breathing, its life force flowing through its roots and into the earth. A soft voice, barely more than a whisper, echoed in her mind. It wasn't a voice she recognized, yet it felt familiar, like a memory from long ago. "You've come, at last." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She glanced around, but there was no one else in the clearing, just her, the fox, and the ancient tree. Yet the voice remained, lingering in the air around her. It wasn't frightening, though. It was calm, soothing, like the voice of an old friend. "Who are you?" she thought, wondering if the tree could hear her. "I am the keeper," the voice replied, soft but clear. "I guard the magic of this place, the lifeblood of the garden. And now you have come, as was always meant to be." Amelia's hand trembled slightly as she kept it pressed against the tree's bark. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but something deep within her stirred. She had always known that this garden was special, that it held secrets the world had long forgotten. But she hadn't expected this, a direct connection with the very heart of its magic. "Why me?" she asked, her voice little more than a thought. "You carry the key within you," the voice whispered. "You have always carried it, passed down through the generations. The pendant you wear, its power is old as this garden. Your family has been the guardians of this place for centuries, though the knowledge has been lost to time, until now." Amelia instinctively reached for the pendant that hung around her neck, her fingers closing around its cool surface. She had always felt that it was special, but she had never known why. Her grandmother had spoken of it with reverence, telling her that it was a gift from the stars, but she had never explained its true purpose. Now, standing here in the heart of the night garden, Amelia began to understand. The pendant was not just a family heirloom. It was a key a key that unlocked the magic of the garden, the ancient power that had been hidden away for so long. "What do I do now?" she asked, her heart racing with anticipation. "You must protect it," the voice replied. "The garden is fragile, its magic delicate. It needs a guardian, someone to ensure that it remains hidden from those who would seek to harm it. That is your role, Amelia. You are the keeper now." The weight of the responsibility settled over her, but it wasn't a burden. It felt right, as though this had always been her destiny, waiting for her to discover it. The fox, sitting silently beside her, seemed to nod in agreement, as though it too understood the significance of the moment. For a long time, Amelia stood there, her hand resting on the tree, the voice of the garden whispering in her mind. She felt a deep connection to the place, a bond that stretched beyond time and space, linking her to the magic of the earth and the stars. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, one of complete belonging, as though she had finally found the place where she was meant to be. Eventually, the voice grew quiet, fading back into the rustle of the leaves and the hum of the night. But the sense of purpose it had given her remained, strong and steady, like the roots of the ancient tree. Amelia took a deep breath and stepped back, her hand falling away from the tree's smooth bark. The fox rose to its feet, its silver fur gleaming in the moonlight, and together they left the clearing, the tree's soft glow fading into the distance behind them. As they made their way back through the garden, Amelia's mind buzzed with the revelations of the night. She had always felt that she was different, that she was connected to the natural world in ways that others couldn't understand. Now, she knew why. She was part of something much larger than herself, something ancient and powerful, something that had been waiting for her to find it. When they reached the edge of the pond, Amelia paused, looking out over the still water. The stars were beginning to fade, and the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a soft pink glow over the garden. The magic of the night was fading with it, but Amelia knew that it was still there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the next time the moon would rise and the garden would awaken.